Hello everyone, and thank you for coming back to my channel. Today, we continue the story of Ly and Hoài Ca, where every moment carries raw, honest, and deeply human emotions. If you've been following from the beginning, you already know how difficult their journey has been. And if you're new here, then you definitely shouldn't skip this episode, because every minute of their story connects seamlessly, like a single breath. So, let's walk this path together. Just sit back, relax, and let the story guide you. After days of storms that battered the entire field, Hoài Ca quietly returned to her familiar garden. The dirt path leading in was still marked with muddy footprints, and the damp smell of earth after the storm lingered heavily in the air. The breeze was gentle, but it still carried a coldness, like a reminder that the raging winds hadn't passed long ago. Before her was a chaotic scene, leaves scattered across the ground, torn and shredded by the storm, piling up in uneven layers. The bamboo hut that once stood firm now leaned to one side, its poles cracked. The garden beds she had tended with such care looked as if some invisible force had clawed through them, leaving deep, jagged grooves. Hoài Ca stood in the midst of the wreckage, silent for a few moments. Not in despair, but because she was searching for something to hold on to, some sign of survival. And then, she found it. Among the crushed leaves, a few remained perfectly intact, surprisingly green, surprisingly alive. She bent down and touched a large cassava root freshly unearthed. Its skin was still covered with soil, but the root was firm and weighty in her hands, like the earth's way of offering comfort to the one who had poured so much care into it. A little farther, rows of corn, though bent low by the wind, still tried to stand upright, their trembling leaves refusing to fall. The sight softened something inside her. Hoài Ca began her familiar work. She carefully dug up each cassava plant, selecting the strongest ones. Her hands, roughened by sun and wind, moved patiently, steadily. With every root she lifted, she inspected it closely before placing it aside, into the small corner she reserved for the next season's seed stock. To others, they were just cassava roots, just plants. But to Hoài Ca, they were a new beginning. She knew she wasn't just salvaging her garden after the storm. She was replanting hope, replanting the belief that no matter how fierce the storm, the earth still nourishes, and people, as long as they endure, can stand again. Under the thin sunlight breaking through after the rain, her eyes held the fatigue of many difficult days. But beneath it, something brighter glowed. Willpower. The will of a woman who had weathered far too many trials, yet never once let life crush her. In the middle of a simple countryside market, where makeshift tarps shield people from the sun, where old bamboo stalls line the narrow paths, and where the scent of damp earth after morning dew lingers in the air, Ha appeared. He walked in from the entrance of the market, carrying a basket of colorful fruits. His face looked healthier than before, cheeks rosier, and his smile gentle like the first breeze of the season. The market at this time of day was both noisy and familiar. The steady calls of vendors selling fish and vegetables. The chaotic clucking of chickens and ducks in a corner. The clattering of bamboo baskets knocking together. And the aroma of boiled corn, roasted sweet potatoes, and fresh herbs, blending into a scent found only in rural markets. And amidst all that bustling energy, Ha somehow brought with him a quiet sense of peace, like a man returning from a long journey, carrying a freshness from a life beginning to bloom. He sat down beside Hoài Ca's stall. As he placed the basket of fruit down, he shared a little about his current job. His tone wasn't boastful, just the humble joy of a man who had finally found some stability. A better monthly salary, a life less strained, and the thing he was most proud of, he had bought his first motorcycle. Not to show off, but because with that motorcycle, he could bring his mother to the city. He didn't want her to keep carrying bundles of vegetables and baskets of sweet potatoes under the harsh sun or cold mornings anymore. He spoke of it in a low, warm voice, one that made it clear how deeply his sense of filial duty had lived inside him all these years. Hoài Ca smiled, a soft, gentle smile, as though the fatigue of the marketplace eased just a little. His happiness somehow made her heart feel lighter too. Then Ha asked about Tony. A simple question, but sincere, the kind only someone who had seen her darkest days would ask. Hoài Ca shared, with a mix of relief and quiet pride, that Tony had adapted to school, learned to play with friends, laughed more often, and no longer cried the way he used to. Every one of his smiles felt to her like a small ray of sunlight warming her long, weary days. There they sat, surrounded by the busy crowd yet wrapped in a calm space that seemed to belong just to them. They talked about the past. The seasons spent watching the sky and the soil for signs of good harvest. Meals made of vegetables and salty fish sauce. Days of working from dawn until late at night. But they also recalled the beautiful things. How the whole neighborhood helped one another repair roofs during storms. How Ha sometimes gave her leftover vegetables or sweet potatoes. And the exhausted evenings when just a few shared words made everything feel lighter. There was no need to talk too much. No need to recount every pain or burden. A look, a nod, was enough. In the noisy countryside market, the moment they sat together became a rare, quiet pause. A place where two weathered souls understood that no matter how life changes, those who once stood beside each other in hardship will always hold a quiet, unshakable respect for one another. By the end of the day, when the last sounds of the countryside market had finally faded into the distance, Hoài Ca packed away the remaining vegetables, brushed the dust from her hands, and walked toward the gate. The afternoon sun had only a few rays left, its golden light falling slanted across the dirt path, casting a gentle, melancholic glow over the whole yard. And that was when she stopped. Standing at the gate was a familiar figure. Familiar, yet strangely distant. Someone who had been waiting there in silence for what seemed like hours. The fading sunlight made her figure look smaller, so small that Hoài Ca needed a few seconds to believe her own eyes. It was Hung's mother. She no longer looked like the woman with the sharp eyes and harsh words that once wounded so deeply. Today, she stood there, trembling. Her shoulders pulled in, her hands gripping the edge of her shirt as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Her face bore wrinkles of age and hardship, but none were as deep as the remorse etched into her eyes. When Hoài Ca stepped closer, the older woman seemed unable to look directly at her. She lowered her gaze, then suddenly spoke. Her voice, once so cold and commanding, now so soft it seemed the evening wind could carry it away. She apologized. Apologized for the words that once cut into Hoài Ca's heart. Apologized for the actions that haunted her long after they happened. Apologized for driving Hung away from the very home where he should have found comfort. And most of all, she simply wanted to see her son. To tell him the things she had held inside for far too long. Each word fell slowly, heavily, so honest that even the small yard grew still. She didn't avoid responsibility, didn't blame circumstances, didn't excuse the mistakes she had made. She simply stood there, an aging mother trying to hold on to what she knew she had nearly lost forever. Hoài Ca listened without interrupting, without reacting sharply. She didn't turn away, didn't show anger, but she also didn't reach out to forgive her right away. She held herself with the calm of someone who had endured enough to understand that emotions cannot be stitched back together with a single apology. She spoke gently but firmly. If the older woman truly wished to make things right. If she wished to heal the wounds she had carved into Hung's heart. Then she needed to stand before her son and say everything herself. Not through someone else. Not indirectly. Only mother and son, face to face. That is the only place where pain can be named, and where healing can begin. The moment stretched out like a scene in slow motion. The remaining sunlight touched the older woman's trembling hands, traced the quiet strength in Hoài Ca's expression, and melted into the open yard. There were no confrontations anymore, no tension like the days before. Just two women, two lives, each carrying her own hurt, her own scars, and her own desire to change. Not everyone has the courage to return. Not everyone has the calm to face what broke them. But in that moment, both of them were learning how to step past the shadows of the past. When everyone had left, the yard returned to its quiet, familiar calm. Hoài Ca gathered the last remaining things and quietly went back to her daily tasks. She sat on her old wooden stool and used a small knife to slice the freshly harvested kohlrabi. Each stroke of the blade was steady and precise. Like the way she tried to keep her life in order despite the constant storms that swept through it. When she finished cutting, she gathered the baskets of vegetables, preparing for the early morning market. Then she walked to the corner of the yard and poured more feed for the chickens. They hurried over, pecking at the corn with carefree eagerness, and somehow, their simple innocence softened something inside her. These small, familiar routines were the thread that kept her grounded. Reminding her that she still had to live, still had to try, day after day. When the work was done, Hoài Ca stood still for a moment, her eyes drifting toward the small house at the end of the yard. The late afternoon light spread a pale golden layer across the tiled roof, making the house look both lonely and strangely warm. Even though life remained full of hardship, in her heart, for the first time in many long months, something was quietly growing. A small hope. But strong enough to keep her standing. Hope that Tony would grow up healthy, without fear, without the heartbreak he once carried. Hope that Hung would understand one day, would forgive, would finally face everything they had both endured. And hope that the cracks between them, however deep, could someday be healed, through sincerity, compassion, and the courage to face the truth. Hoài Ca knew life was never easy. But she also understood this. What helps people survive the storms is not luck, not inherent strength, but the way they choose to live. She chose kindness. She chose patience. She chose endurance, little by little. Not resignation, but the resilience to keep walking, even when her legs were tired, even when her heart felt heavy. Amid the shifting tides of life, it is this quiet persistence, this unspoken strength, that forms the true power of a woman. The long day finally came to an end. Hoài Ca stood on the porch, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the hill, her heart lighter, yet still carrying its quiet worries. Everything that happened today felt like the beginning of a new turning point in her life, filled with both hope and challenges. Will Hung return to face everything? Will he and his mother be able to heal their old wounds? And will the small spark of hope in Hoài Ca's heart shine bright enough to guide her forward? All of that will only be answered in the next episode. Thank you for watching until the end of today's story. Don't forget to leave a comment and follow the channel so you won't miss what happens next. See you in the upcoming episode.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện về Hoài Ca và Hùng nha mọi người ơi. Thì như mọi người cũng đã biết thì Hoài Ca và Hùng đã yêu nhau một thời gian khá là dài rồi. Nhưng tình cảm của họ thì ai cũng đã biết. Trước đó thì Hoài Ca và Hùng bị mẹ của Hùng phản đối về tình yêu mọi người. Thì bây giờ thì mình cũng đã edit xong rồi. Mình đang đặt tên video. Tạm biệt mọi người.